In the previous chapters, we focused on what crises are and how they develop. Chapter 4 asks a different question. What happens when a crisis is so large that it permanently changes how we think about communication, leadership, and responsibility? These are not everyday crises. These are moments that reshape expectations for decades. This is where the class shifts into heavier topics and deeper insights in the lectures. Not every crisis becomes history-making. A crisis earns that label when it is unprecedented in scale or impact, existing systems fail or prove insufficient, new communication expectations are created. As we go through these cases, pay attention not just to what happened, but to what changed afterward. We study these cases because they become reference points. When something similar happens later, people ask, is this another Katrina? Is this like COVID? Is this another Columbine? These crises become benchmarks, and that's why communicators must understand them deeply. A common thread across all 4 cases is this: the existing playbook was not enough. When systems break down at scale, communicators must improvise, innovate, and sometimes abandon best practices in favor of human judgment. This idea, thinking outside the box, will appear again and again. COVID-19 was not just a health crisis. It was a communication crisis layered on top of science, fear, politics, and uncertainty. For the first time in modern history, the entire world was experiencing the same crisis at the same time, but responding very differently. What made COVID especially challenging was that information evolved in real time. Guidance changed as science changed. Fear and misinformation spread faster than facts. Communicators were forced to explain uncertainty, something audiences deeply resist. This crisis taught us that clarity does not always mean certainty. After COVID, we moved to a very different type of crisis, one where official systems paused and human compassion stepped in. This transition matters because it shows that crisis communication doesn't always come from institutions. In the aftermath of 9/11, information was intentionally withheld. This wasn't about secrecy for control, it was about preventing further harm. This case introduces an important tension. Transparency is critical, but total transparency is not always possible or ethical. Columbine was a turning point for schools, media, and crisis communicators. At the time, schools were not prepared for the scale of attention, trauma, and scrutiny that followed a mass shooting. This crisis forced districts nationwide to rethink crisis preparedness. After Columbine, schools learned that crisis communication must address immediate safety, accurate information, grieving families, traumatized students and staff, intense, prolonged media attention. This is not a one-day communication challenge. It lasts years. Hurricane Katrina is often called the grandparent of modern natural disasters. The storm itself was catastrophic, but what made Katrina history-making was infrastructure failure, delayed response, visible inequality, communication breakdowns. Unlike sudden acts of violence, Katrina unfolded over time. People watched suffering happen and felt leadership failed to act quickly enough. This created a sense of abandonment, which permanently damaged trust in institutions. This chapter helps us understand that human-caused crises trigger moral outrage. Natural disasters trigger questions of preparedness and equity. But in both cases, communication failures magnify harm. Across all 4 cases, one pattern emerges. When systems fail or stall, communities often step in. Effective crisis communication must recognize, support, and amplify community response, not override it. Journalists covering massive crises face limited access, incomplete information, emotional pressure, time constraints, Understanding this helps communicators work with media rather than against them. Fear, grief, anger, and confusion dominate these moments. Messages that ignore emotion, even if factually correct, often fail. This chapter reinforces that empathy is a strategic skill. Together, these cases show us that no single response fits all crises. Scale changes everything. Trust is fragile. Communication choices linger long after the crisis ends. We don't study these cases to relive tragedy. We study them so future communicators recognize warning signs, avoid repeating failures, design better systems, communicate with humanity under pressure. The lessons from these history-making crises lead directly into prevention. If these events taught us anything, it's that waiting to respond is too late. Chapter 5 shifts us toward anticipating and preventing crises before they reach this scale. As communicators, your responsibility is not just to speak, but to think ahead. History-making crises remind us that communication decisions can save trust or destroy it. If one of these crises happened today, what would we do differently and why?